You have just seen the case study film Otto. Here to provide an interpretation of the film from the phenomenological perspective is Dr. Gary Stollak of the Department of Psychology, Michigan State University. Gary, what would you say the nature of Otto's problem is? Does he have a problem?
My first response is almost facetious, is that life is a problem. And one way to perceive the world of Otto as he's experiencing it through the film is, in one sense, not to get caught up in the exegesis of it, that is, as time goes past, but to take each of his experiences right from the beginning, right to the end, and feel along with him where he is. And right in the beginning, we sense a man who in his world is valuing his work. And then he came to a flower, and he valued the flower. He was a little bothered by do not touch, and then went back to his work. So if you even use the word problem, is within each situation that he finds himself, from the card playing to being at work with his boss, in the restaurant with the new employee coming in. Is there a problem there for him, not for the others per se? And if I'm going to feel with Otto, how is he being in each of these situations? So in a funny sense, if we leave out the whole center section and go from the beginning to the very end, and the very end, I'm very happy with Otto too in flying the kite. And so when I think of what is the word problem, it's hard. Now when he's with his wife, I feel hurt for him. With his boss, I feel hurt for him.
Are there some particular critical incidents that you see in the film?
I feel there are critical incidents at work, with the boss coming in and putting demands upon him, at the card game in a discussion of a funeral, and people not being the way he wants them to be, and his wife bothering him. And it's so easy to begin to perceive that it's a critical incident for other people with him. But it is, in a sense, often for him, a critical incident that he is not, from his perspective, handling. That is, he rebounds. He comes to grips with it. Now, I'm not saying that that's to the satisfaction of his boss, or the satisfaction of Mark, or the satisfaction of his wife, but I sense he's rebounding. I'm sensing he's trying to handle it. And one of the stresses I feel for him as I watch the whole film is a fantastic sense of loneliness. How the people that he meets and encounters in his everyday life, from his boss to his wife, aren't people who are valuing what he's experiencing. Which is not life, and that's why I begin by saying life is a problem. Who says people do value our experience? And when he is expressing himself fairly clearly, again, others might not like it, but he's not being responded to by other people in their valuing his experiences. Now, society might be bothered by the way he's handling that conflict between here's what I experience, here's what I'm valuing about my experiences, and yet the other people that I encounter are not valuing that, are not sharing with me, being with me in my experiences. And the end point of that is hurt. Now, I won't use the word problem, I use the word hurt. And he's being hurt time after time from his perspective. And I can feel along with that.
You identify loneliness. You identify a feeling of hurt. Are there other problem situations for Otto? Are there other kinds of things that you would picture are hurting him? Is it the fact that he is just not understood?
I don't see him being bothered that much. I don't sense. And again, what you really want to do in the phenomenological perspective is to be in the other person's shoes. And that's a very hard thing to do in life, and you're always taking guesses. But I kept sensing that Otto wasn't being bothered that much by what people were hurting. That is, he would respond genuinely to them, and he would again rebound. So I don't have to say it's a symptom or a problem. You, of course, get the sense as the film goes by that the social world, especially his wife, and that the work is going to collapse around him. They're going to be making demands upon him that he clearly will not be able to handle. And I think as being a third-party observer to the film, I felt sorry for his wife, felt sorry for him that he couldn't make his wife happy. But I think we can get trapped in making our own value judgments that he's not happy. You know, we make judgments that a man is supposed to do X, Y, and Z, and he's supposed to have a certain kind of relationship with his wife. But I'm not sensing that he's that bothered by it.
We see at the ending of the film, Otto is in the park flying his kite at 5 o'clock in the morning, and the police are about to go up to him. How do you interpret this part of the film? Does it have a special meaning for you?
Yes, my first reaction when we see him flying the kite was, hey, I'd like to do that too, and I wish I could be doing it. The fact that it's at 5 o'clock in the morning and it's in a fairly private place, I would have a different reaction to it knowing that than if he was nude in a public place at 10 o'clock. So my first response, oh, it's 5 o'clock. He's wearing his pajamas. You know, and if I was a passerby, we could take it from two perspectives. One is I'm passing by, or if I was with the police. And if I was a passerby, I would almost, my first response, and I really hope the viewer of the film would sense, is that's a nice thing to do. Now, we're led along by the film to say, aha, this is a breakdown. But if we took it in of itself, of a man of his age flying a kite, we might say, if we were passerbys, that's a fun thing to do. Like jogging at 5 o'clock, why not fly a kite at 5 o'clock? And we can again be trapped in not being with him in the joyousness of the experience. I think we too quickly assume, too, as the police enter, that he is doing something wrong. And if I was with the police as a professional, that is, the wife had called me, and I was accompanying the police, that would tend to be my first response, is I want to know what he is experiencing as he flies the kite. And I might say, can I join you? Can I be with you in your experience? And his response to that would tell me where he is. Is this a painful withdrawal? Or will he say, hey man, join me. Let's fly it together. And then the response of the police might have to be contingent upon me being with him and how he responds.
I suppose Otto is brought to you by either the police or by his wife as a patient. How do you handle a man like this?
Can you, see, I can't think of the word patient. As a phenomenologist, I am with a person in life. And the thing that I'm more concerned about is, and I begin by saying we're all going to die, if you will. And what is a man of his age, in his world, what is he experiencing? And my encounters with him, whether he's voluntarily brought to me or involuntarily brought to me to encounter me, is to convince him that I can be with him. Again, if I knew his past history, I'm so struck by the loneliness and his feeling that he has so little worth as evaluated by others, that's my first concern. I would want to treat you that way, whether you're a patient or a friend. And that's my real first concern, is how can I persuade any human being who's with me that I care about them, that we are together in living, that we are mortal, that we grow older, we suffer, we have hurts, we have pains. And if anything, the film takes us along that path of a man growing older. And I would want him to feel that I could be with him. Now, I'm not interested in that to produce change, and I think we can get confused about that. I just want to persuade or convince another human being that being with me is a good experience. Now, whether that produces a change, I don't know.
All right. Thank you, Gary. Now, to discuss the phenomenological perspective, we have Dr. Richard Price, representing the social perspective, Dr. Bruce Denner, the analytic perspective, and Dr. John Gottman, the behavioral perspective. Gentlemen, what would you have to say about the phenomenological perspective that you just heard?
My question really is this. Isn't there a conflict inherent here between the needs and the valuings of the social structure on the one hand and the needs and the valuing of the individual on the other?
Well, you know, again, I began by saying life is a problem, and we can't diminish the conflicts we're going to face, the demands put upon us in one-to-one encounters with a wife or a family or a secretary. To live is to not be able to avoid those conflicts of values.
Let me be a little bit attacking then and ask you the question
Sure.
in another way. Doesn't your view imply a kind of passive acceptance of suffering? I'd sort of code it this way. It sounds as if you're saying, don't change it, just experience it. What do you have to say about that?
My feeling is, why not? That is, at one kind of level, suffering is very much being alive.
But it's like you're saying nothing's wrong and nothing has to change. It's almost like you don't see him perhaps hallucinating while he's lying in bed. You don't see his compulsive character and the pain. You see the pain, but somehow it's almost like if he were falling off a cliff, would you just say goodbye to him as he fell? Don't you feel any need to save him, to bring him back?
You might say, look to the right, the view is beautiful.
Yeah,
as he
it's
was falling.
just
It's hard. It's hard. I mean, we're dealing with very basic questions of values and how much a person called a therapist uses his values, uses his concerns in their encounters with other people. Now, when you bring an issue of, do you stop someone from committing suicide, that's another issue. But there's a problem, the same thing in medical ethics, about a person not asking you for help and how much you can intercede. In the same sense, if there is a sadness, a pervasive sadness that I think we all felt, is that he is not reaching out, not being clear about what more he needs with his boss, with his wife, that he's ineffective in getting some of his needs expressed clearly. But unless he asks me, now be clear too, even involuntarily, see, I'm not saying he has to be voluntarily, is that as a human being, I want to be with him. I mean, we should want to be with each other. And I don't have to care about whether he's hallucinating or has this problem or that problem, to care about, can I share a moment in time with you together?
So you feel no need to save him from the psychosis as he drifts into psychosis?
There might be other people who are necessary to help him with other kinds of concerns that he might perceive or that society is concerned with. In the same way, there's no reason not to assume, just as in medicine, that one doctor fixes the heart, another one fixes the brain. You know, it's still the same body, but we don't ask for a general practitioner to fix from the head to the toe. There's something I can do as a phenomenologist or a person concerned with being as compared to a person with another belief system or another set of values, which I can appreciate too. And if you want to change the social world, I say thank goodness. If you want to change some of the systems he's in and some of the world he finds himself in, I say that's fine too. But what can I do as a human being? And I don't have to diminish my contribution to his life and my contribution to understanding where he is right now from what you might do from another perspective.
Don't you think you run the risk of encouraging it by sitting with him and participating in the psychosis? It might push him over the brink?
Yeah, and
once you value that something's wrong with being over the brink, there's nothing necessarily wrong with going over the brink. We can argue that suicide in and of itself, because it ends life, is the final negative response. But short of that, we diminish the experiencing and valuing the experiencing as a productive human experience, productive human value. And I'm not so clear or have to decide that being psychotic or having hallucinations is wrong or bad. It's certainly hurtful. And by our response, by saying psychosis is a psychotic experience is bad, it's because we don't want him to be hurt.
Well, one thing that troubled me as you were talking was that I sensed that you were very warm and caring. And I think it would be very nice to come to you if I was troubled. But is the relationship that you would form with him, your being with him, how would that deal with his inability to be with other people?
We have to argue about some kind of process. That is, the kind of process I would hope that would occur in my relationship with you as two human beings and my hopes for him. We don't sense him trusting many people. He's had to live the way he's lived to the level of happiness that he has achieved by controlling his intimacy.
Well, what would you
so
do,
let me get to
what would you do once you had established the trust?
No, I want to get back to another point when you talk about me being warm. That doesn't preclude, and I think it's sometimes misinterpreted, very strong confrontation, a direct attack on the manner of experiencing, the wishing to withdraw from me, the wish to withdraw. And as I might describe that and say, Otto, because I care about you, I'm not letting you go away from me. I'm not going to let you deny. I'm not going to argue I'm going to succeed.
You're saying that if Otto reaches out to you, that you'll be willing to stand with him and, to the extent he's willing, share his life. But if Otto doesn't reach out to you, would you reach out to him?
Yes, and get back to the question of warmth again. You don't have to voluntarily be with me for me to try. Again, it's the struggle. It doesn't mean necessarily you succeed. And I want to sense that Otto, at some level, wants me to struggle and wants to succeed. And I depend on that. And that's where the confrontation comes. Otto, you can't leave me. You can't escape me. I'm going to sit in this room, assuming, if we expect the worst, that he ends up in a padded cell. I might go into the room with him and say, I'm going to now live with you 24 hours a day until you begin talking to me.
Well, here's where I get confused, Gary, because on the one hand you're saying, you accept him where he's at and, and you empathize and you see his point of view. On the other hand, you see him as messing up his life. How do these both sit, Is he sick? Is he troubled? Or is he just perfect the way he is?
Because we're feeling the pain of his wife or the pain of the secretary, the pain of Mark. So we begin to interpret their hurt. Or we can make a generalization to society's hurt. But that doesn't mean necessarily that he's hurt. But again, to be part of living, there are going to be hurts, there are going to be pains, there's going to be moments of anguish, rather than a sense that what he's living now is going to be the same 2 weeks later. As if he took a vacation and then it would get better. It might get worse. We don't know the future. We can make guesses upon what my experiencing now is going to predict for my future, or we can sense that, Otto is going to get worse, and these events, like Death of a Salesman, I felt very much the life of Willie Loman in what Otto was experiencing, and that inevitability of self-destruction. But yet, in the end of Death of a Salesman, the wife sensed that her husband lived fully, even though he made so many mistakes, even though he hurt her and hurt the sons. He was alive. He struggled to live.
But I always saw that speech as phony. Because he didn't really achieve his goals. That that's a cover-up. That Otto is going crazy. He's going insane. And that he needs to be helped in some way.
Well, now, suppose the wife comes to you for advice and says, how can you help me? Or how can I help Otto? Or even if the boss were to come to you and say that, would you be in a position to respond to them?
My first response is hesitancy, because I tend to sense that the word help is a tricky word too. And my job with any of them is, how do I convince them that I can be with them? And it's hard for me to think of the next step. And I think sometimes the psychological science breaks down at the next step. Often because we jump to the next step without first achieving this first step.
But do you think that your caring and your warmth will turn him away from his psychosis, his irrationality? I mean, the man is losing control. Do you think that that will do it? Or do you feel that first you're just warm with him and then someone comes in and does some special technique? That's where I get confused.
I'm saying, as Ken was really saying, you do begin with an assumption. I mean, in a sense, we don't have any knowledge about this, but an assumption that one of the things that make us uniquely human is there is a drive for health, a striving. And if we had more warm, caring, human relationships, that might emerge. And that's where the creativity emerges from each of us. Now, we might find that the person does grow in their psychosis, that the psychosis is a necessary experience. It might not be, and the person might more and more withdraw. And frankly, both behavioral science doesn't know what to do, and I don't know what to do. But I will struggle to be human. I will struggle to be with the person.
For instance, would you give him medication to alter the psychotic experience? Something that would cut it short or alter it? Or do you value the hallucinations and the delusions and the autistic thought so that he should just experience it?
My own sense is that I would tend to say we should value it. That right now in time, the only way you can live is to believe you're Jesus Christ, to lay in your urine and feces. And that's where you are now, That's what you have to experience now. But I'm going to be here with you, and when you want to be with me, more actively than the way you're expressing it now, I'll be here. And I don't know if I'll succeed, but if I don't make the effort, who will?
Let me ask you, Gary, a number of people who hold views similar to yours frequently talk about the experience of madness or the experience of craziness as a growth experience itself, as a kind of transcendent experience. How do you react to that? Do you agree?
At the moment it's being experienced, I'm sure it's not something to be treasured. Again, I think that's the important point of the phenomenological perspective. At the moment of the experience, if we can project ourselves when we are hurt, it's not pleasant. No one's going to say, aha, we should all be put in a concentration camp and a hot box. But we can't disparage the potential value. I mean, first, that's what the person has to experience right now. We wish it didn't have to be for them, because we don't want to be hurt, and because we have empathy, we don't want that person to experience what he's experiencing. But are we so sure 2 weeks later or 6 years later how that experience might have been necessary? And any attempt, however well-intentioned, to circumvent it through drugs, shock therapies, was the right decision. And to be honest scientists, we don't know. And what we can say is a perspective, is a direction, is a frame of reference. It isn't a truth. And all I sense is my truth is and that's an assumption of the phenomenological position, is what I'm experiencing now is necessary for me now.
Yeah, but aren't you concerned that he's playing with his kite rather than playing with his wife? That he's acting like a child?
I can value your concern for him that that's the way you wish it might be. But where he is necessary for him.
But isn't what you're saying that you're going to understand his position, be with him, and essentially going to get him ready for change by other consultants?
Except the first assumption is, why not also assume that when one is with another person, that there is internal motivation for growth?
So you're assuming that he does have the necessary skills or abilities.
We certainly see it throughout the film in terms of his capability on the job. You know, if anything, I feel more hurt from him in his relationship with his wife, more of a distancing from her than his work. You know, he tends to be most appropriate with the secretary, who, incidentally, of any character in the film, I sense, cares for him and verbalizes it in a language, because it's at work, that he hears her caring. And then he tends to be, quote, more appropriate, as we all wish, in being apologetic.
Isn't she encouraging his primitive behavior? I mean, she's maintaining that, you know, like she's not really catching him. And she's acting silly and childish in a way, and he is. It's almost going to feel like two children. You think that she's really good for him?
But again, you're saying there's something wrong with being a child or for two children to play. If the business is efficient and he produces, I don't know if he sits in his office and plays with marbles or does anything else. You know, at the level of when does the business care in terms of productivity? I think inevitably, until for the rest of eternity, there will be a conflict between societal goals, living in groups, and what the individual wants. That's the ultimate metaphysic. That what I want to experience, is always going to be in conflict between larger goals, larger issues. And I don't think it's ever going to be diminished. We hope in what we call a humane human society that the care and the respect for the individual is a high value in the creation of a business enterprise instead of, quote, the profit motive, the efficiency motive. But I think that's a conflict that's always going to exist.